Probably the biggest thing, which has unfortunately gotten more difficult, is really understand that what we call a substance use disorder is a disease or a disorder, that some people's brains respond to alcohol and drugs differently than other people's brains, as opposed to this is some moral issue or shame-based issue, or that this person is not intentionally doing these things. Their brain has basically been hijacked by the drugs.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark Howley.
The Mark Howley Show.
How did you do it and why? Hey, this is Mark Howley, and this is the Mark Howley Show. Today we have a compelling guest. He's Mr. Ross Finke, who has spent the better part of 40 years in intervening with people with substance abuse. Ross, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good. Let me ask you, how does a family know if they're on the outside looking in? What are some of the things that would make them say, we got a problem?
Behaving foolishly, not coming home, being where they're supposed to be at certain times, literally appearing, slurring words, zoned out, nodding off, depending on what drugs they might be using. Families know tells of when somebody is using once they start looking for them. You can talk to a family and they will say, I know if they've been using because when I drive home, this certain blind is closed.
They pick things up.
They pick things up.
Yeah.
They've gone out to the garage more times today than normal. So they begin to sense when use is going on, and so problems happening.
Yeah. At what point would you say a family says we got to do something? I mean, is there a specific point that you notice?
In dealing with interventions, I have a pretty set roadmap that I teach people who contact me when they express a concern about somebody, to give them a guideline of what do we do, because the things people naturally do is to try to talk to the person about it, because we've all been trained, let's talk about it, what's going on with you, blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't work very well. So I actually teach people a roadmap of 2 things that anybody who wants to be helpful ought to do, 3 common mistakes people make, and then 3 levels of approaching different than how they might have approached with those mistakes.
I'm presuming at the family level, there's initially a lot of denial from the person with the substance abuse.
The person with the use is going to be denying that it's a problem, and will be trying to convince everybody it's some other problem, and trying to elicit everybody into helping them with this other problem. And they are somehow bad and awful and terrible if they won't help with this other problem and keep focusing on the use, which isn't the problem.
Yeah. So what is that roadmap? I mean, where do we start?
There are 2 things that anybody who wants to be helpful to somebody, from a overall perspective of, I start with the perspective of, you need to start with understanding I can't fix this person.
Yeah.
That I don't have the power to fix them. They're going to have to participate. So I'm going to have to shift out of an attitude of, I'm going to fix this person, as opposed to, how can I be supportive of and not participate in them not getting help? So this overriding, I've got a problem with what they're doing, I can't fix what they're doing. I probably even asked them to stop doing what they're doing, and they haven't been able to, or didn't do it, or were angry about it. And so then from that perspective, there are 2 things anybody who wants to be helpful, I always encourage people to do to get through it, because they've got a problem they're dealing with. Number 1 is educate themselves about the disease of addiction, or what we currently medically call a substance use disorder. And number 2 is get a support network for yourself, because you're emotionally tied into your concerns about this person, and those emotional concerns are likely going to run the show on how you respond, which is not going to be the best.
And how do you do that education?
Education happens through getting yourself around other people who have dealt with addiction in their life. You look at most people have some, if they are willing to finally say, hey, this is going on for me, to begin to talk about it. There are groups like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, which are family sides of 12-step programs. There are treatment programs. There are therapists who work with substance use disorders and family members of people who have them. So you put yourself around people who've dealt with this, walk through it, done it.
And are you directing them there?
I will generally refer them to those resources, which for them to potentially take if they do.
Mm-hmm.
Families don't always take them.
Yeah.
But I'm going to keep going. Here's this roadmap for you to most effectively approach this problem you're having with what's going on with your loved one and their use, so that you can be a positive impact on this rather than doing things that are going to interfere. So education, support, get yourself around people, understand. Probably the biggest thing, which has unfortunately gotten more difficult, is really understand that what we call a substance use disorder is a disease or a disorder, that some people's brains respond to alcohol and drugs differently than other people's brains, as opposed to this is some moral issue or shame-based issue, or that this person is not intentionally doing these things. Their brain has basically been hijacked by the drugs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a tough concept for people to grasp because they experience the behavior and the attitudes and the things they're dealing with. So
And then the reason for
support.
therapy is obviously that there's a massive impact on them psychologically, being the observer.
Yeah. Because they're powerless over fixing this thing with somebody they love. And that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So does it take some time to get them to a therapist, or what's the success rate of saying, hey, Mrs. Johnson, go see a therapist?
Sometimes it's specifically a therapist, but I generally will say start doing these things. And then if they continue to be interacting with me about this intervention process, I'm going to be guiding them and coaching them to take those steps, which might possibly at some point lead to, maybe you ought to see a therapist now because you haven't been able to do these other things.
And you can refer them to a
And
therapist.
I can refer them to people who do that, and there are treatment programs that do that, as well as individual therapists in private practice. So education and support are the first two things in that roadmap, based on, I can't fix this person. I've got a problem with what they're doing. How do I solve my problem? And how do I feel good about what I've done?
Yeah.
There then are three common mistakes people make over and over and over again. The biggest mistake, and it's so easy to understand why, because we're doing it here, we're talking about stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And families will attempt to talk to their loved one about their drinking and drug use. If their loved one will talk about it, sometimes they won't. They just get angry and defensive, but they will begin to talk about it. And those talks usually lead to distracting over here, that it's this thing over here that's the problem, not the drugs. And then families begin to help people and begin to think that it's something else is the problem, as opposed to
the drug
drugs.
addict or alcoholic is deflecting.
He deflects,
endlessly
deflecting.
Yeah.
And they are not rational about their use. So I will always go back to educate yourself about the disease and to begin to understand then that, they're not rational about their use. If they were rational, they would not continue to have these problems. A healthy brain should not keep doing something that they often say is the solution to other problems that's causing them problems. The brain should kick in and go, this is a crappy solution to my trauma, to this, to that, to those things.
Yeah.
I should use a different problem, but that's the nature of the disease of addiction, is that, an addict's brain keeps thinking it's a solution.
I wouldn't have driven into the wall if my father had raised me better.
Yes.
Yeah. And they'll go into great lengths trying to avoid that, right?
Oh, well, and once again, I truly believe that most of that is not intentional. Most of that is their brain really thinks differently because of the impact the drug has had on their brain.
Mm-hmm. So they're just not.
They're just
not there.
Their brain has been hijacked by the drug on this issue of their drug use. They might be very rational about other things, but about their drug use, they just are not able to see it. Because if they were able to see it, they would likely change it and can't.
I've heard things.
Mhm.
Well, we've both heard it's like, it's your best friend, it's your
Uh-huh.
lover, it's and I presume you would agree.
Um, yeah, to varying degrees. People, it's something that brings them pleasure or relieves pain.
Mhm.
And it does so well in their brains, which it doesn't do in other people's brains to the same extent, is why they are having a problem with it if they get exposed to it where other people don't.
Yeah, yeah. So that was the first thing I think you mentioned. So
That's
go
the
ahead. You
first
you tell
mistake.
us the
Yeah.
three. Let's go
The
for it.
second mistake is people make emotional appeals. Can't you see how much this is impacting the kids? Can't you see this? Which is a variation on talking and trying to rationalize with somebody who's not rational. But most of the time, people have heard about, the concept of an intervention where there are letters and people write these letters and they say all these things. People have an understanding of that. Unfortunately, it's a superficial understanding that does not grasp the intricacies and subtleties of the process usually. And so they're writing these letters or saying these things to emotionally appeal. And emotional appeals almost never work. In fact, I tell people, if you want to get your feelings hurt, make an emotional appeal to an addict about their use, because it's not going to work and you're going to feel like they don't love you, don't care about you because of this. So now we better get back to education and support for you to help you walk through this, because when you feel that way, you're now going to get angry at them and begin to act angry towards them. And that's when people say, you're out of my life, blah, 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 those kind of things, and get all pissed off. And that's not the goal.
That must be hard to stay away from.
It's very hard, which is why I tell people you can't solve this education and support to help you walk through this.
Yeah, yeah.
Because,
and then
you get to decide, am I willing to walk through this process with someone? And I can't guarantee that they're going to get well. I know that I can help people and tell people that if you follow this roadmap, you will get to a place where you will have a sense of, I've done what I can, regardless of what the outcome is, as opposed to bouncing back and forth, to being angry, to doing everything for them, to doing nothing for them, and bouncing around, and it's all emotionally driven, as opposed to, no, I have an understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing and what. Okay. So, not rational. Emotional appeals don't work very well. And the third mistake is people have this idea that somebody has to hit bottom on their own to somehow seek help and get well. And as with many things, there's an element of truth to that, but there's a whole lot of mythology and untruth to that. Somebody simply has to request or agree to get help and participate in getting help in a treatment process that the family is comfortable with and has done their due diligence on picking. Why have I picked this program? Based on education and support they've gotten for themselves. And but somebody doesn't have to want to. Most addicts and alcoholics are too sick, as the nature of the disease, to have that epiphany moment, though some do. Most get to treatment because some outside source makes a request for them to get help in a loving, caring way, sometimes not as loving and caring, but in a way where treatment seems like a better option than the alternative. And that's okay. Somebody doesn't have to want to go to treatment for treatment to be successful. For treatment to be successful, the person with the addiction, with the substance use disorder, needs to follow the recommendations they're given in treatment.
Yeah, yeah.
And
we know that.
the nature of the disease is to think they don't need to, and think they don't have it in the first place, and think they don't need to. And so now we're back to educating the family on, okay, here's what to expect. This is a process. This is an event. Even if they go to treatment, this isn't necessarily over.
Yeah.
Here's this process that you're in and that you're going to continue to walk through with your support network. So
yeah. How much have employers more recently become attuned to that?
in a lot of ways, I've been in the business over 40 years.
Yeah, yeah. So you're not a newbie.
So I have seen swings back and forth both ways, both employers, schools, and right now is one of those times where uh, it's not as supportive as it has been in the past.
What do you attribute that to?
Funding. There used to be alcohol and drug counselors in most high schools and intervention teams, and they were pretty proactive. They backed off of that. Um, uh, the broader acceptance of cannabis and legalization of cannabis helped that, since a lot of those early interventions were with kids with cannabis. Though, and then with employers, I can tell you that there are companies where there are a lot of people, like Boeing,
Yeah.
where there are a lot of people where they are still doing drug tests and things, and they have a lot of people that they refer for help as as opposed to them being fired from their job.
Okay.
And giving them a period of time. So there, it still is there in larger companies. In smaller companies, sometimes mom and pop shops can be very supportive, and sometimes smaller businesses, it's hard to support the process that's
Well, they
needed
can't
to do.
afford it.
They can't afford it. Yeah,
They need the
can't afford it.
person
They need the person, and they need somebody in the spot. So
that's functional.
yeah.
That's functional.
Yeah.
And so now, I presume the law plays a role in supporting the opportunity of going to recovery.
The law supports that process. Yeah. And there have been various attempts by the law to try to find ways that work the best. And with one of the challenges is, and I think it happens with lots of things in our society, there's no 100% solution to any of the problems. And so there's always going to be some percentage that's not solved and that can be picked at and drawn into as to why this doesn't work because of this 1%. But there, you meet lots of people who their first exposure to getting some type of treatment or help is through the legal system.
Yeah.
Laws, courts, jobs, and families.
Yeah. Pretty simple.
And once again, when we went back to that, you don't have to want to go to treatment. You just have to agree to go to treatment. Most people get to treatment because jobs, courts, or families have made somebody the opportunity to seek treatment as opposed to some other consequence. And many of those people, not all by any means, access that, and with the help of treatment, move towards recovery.
What do you think about, we'll call it marijuana in my day and age?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Okay, big topic, because I think in our society, going way back, how we talk about drugs in general has been skewed in somewhat now systemic ways. Laws making drugs illegal back into the late 1800s, early 1900s were generally being made illegal because people of color were using them.
Yeah.
And we made the drug bad. So I don't know that they're the thinking that a drug is bad. You hear fentanyl. They still use fentanyl medically.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
not killing everybody.
It's not killing everybody. We have this uproar about athletes using performance-enhancing drugs, and I had a performance-enhancing drug with a cup of coffee this morning.
Yeah.
So we have this mistaken sort of narrative of this enemy that has been created. So we are still, and even in the Seattle area or Portland or some more liberal cities, have attempted to try to break free from the criminalization of things. And I think that's still the way they do it has problems, and they still need to hammer some of that out.
Do you think
But
that
I
marijuana
don't know.
do you think that marijuana in itself is problematic?
I think there are people who can use marijuana, or what they now prefer to have called cannabis. Um, um, just like some people can drink and some people can, opiate medications work wonderfully for the majority of people. Some people, addiction is about a drug's interaction with an individual's body chemistry, and you don't know exactly how that's going to happen until they experience it.
Yeah.
I would never know whether or not I was allergic to grass pollen until I got exposed to grass pollen.
Good point.
Okay. People will not know until. Now, if you have a family history of allergy to grass pollen, your chances are probably high. So there is a family basis with addictions as well as other types of things that our bodies respond to in certain ways. So, and I believe that there has the challenge that happens with legalization of cannabis, marijuana, is it sends us it's okay, as opposed to it can be okay and it can be problematic, and that's a more deeper conversation
Yeah.
that we don't like to have, and people don't have the time or bandwidth or want to look at that deeper conversation.
Yeah.
And that's true about drug stuff in general.
Yeah.
And there's we made drugs bad when most people take drugs at some times. I mean, we make chemicals in food bad when food is chemicals.
Yeah.
So it's more complicated than people like to think about.
So when do we go into what are the steps to actually go into action? Now we're saying, okay, we need an intervention. We've gone through training 1, 2, 3. Now
there are 3 levels of intervention that I teach. People hear about intervention. There's a TV show about intervention, not terribly wild about it. But I teach 3 levels of intervention. It's shifting how people are approaching it from talking about it, making appeals, not doing anything because, they've got to hit their bottom. All the mistakes, if we can get those out of the way, then people can approach somebody. And those approaches are all going to be making a request to take action. So the lowest level of intervention involves an individual or a small group that are willing to go together and simply approach a person and say, hey, I'm really concerned. Maybe I know you're not because we've talked about this before, but I'm really concerned. Will you please come talk to a professional who can assess whether this is a addiction problem or a substance use disorder problem or not? Help me out here. Make it your problem you're requesting to get some help with from them, to request them to take an action that involves, will you come with me to talk to a professional? And you want to get in the door with them, that they agreed to have you go. If they say, well, I don't want you to come, but I'll go myself, it's like, yeah, you're sending them to a black hole where now you have to listen to them tell you what the person said because of HIPAA laws and things. But if you're requesting to go with them, they open the door for the professional to be able to include them in the process. So you're going in and saying, hey, I'm concerned. Would you be willing to come talk to a professional with me? Help me out here, please.
It's a big step.
You're entitled to say no. So instead of talking to them about whether they think they have a problem and whether they think they need to do something about the problem, you already know the answer. They're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's apparent.
That's irrational on the family's part to keep having that discussion when the person's not doing, or getting mad at them for not doing something. So you're putting into, I'm going to make a request for them to take action from a place of help me out. Will you take this action, and see what they say? And if they say no, say, great, you're entitled to not. I'm still worried. I need to figure what I need to do. And now the family has to go, okay, I understand that I have a lack of power here. How do I now bring in more power? And now you're looking at, how do I bring in more people from his life, her life? How do I bring in people from their life who can help me to approach them to make this request? So you go from level 1, which is an individual making that request, to or a small tight group, to a larger group of people. So the power is going to be more people from more aspects of this person's life are coming simply to make a request to action. This isn't a, write letters and if you don't do this, we're going to do that kind of thing. This is a larger group coming and saying, we're all concerned. Will you come talk to a professional with us or this representative of our group who can assess whether this is a problem? So we have a professional opinion about this. I'm not a professional. You're not. We're concerned. We're concerned. We know you might not be, but we would like to hear from a professional to help us not be so concerned. Will you help us out here?
And that's still no consequence.
No consequence. The third level of intervention is when people get to a point where they're ready to say, I need to do something different here if you don't get help. I can't control what you're doing, but I can control what I'm doing. And I have begun with my support and help and education to understand that the things I'm doing might not really be helpful to you. And they might actually be harmful to you. And so I'm going to need to do these things different in this relationship if you're unwilling to get help. And that's when a formal guided intervention would be done, what people often think about of an intervention, where an interventionist would be with them to walk through that process of helping them present that information to them as to why they're concerned. And here is ultimately, if you're not willing to get help at this time, here's what we need to do differently. And that we're always here for you when you're ready to get help. We're not here to say we hate you, you're out of our life if we don't do this. We need to make these adjustments to protect ourselves and those we protect from how this disease is impacting us. Since you're not taking actions to help protect us, we're going to take actions to protect us.
Okay. So really you're not so much saying, oh gosh, you go. It's look, if you don't go, I have to fall back and help me.
We can't make them do anything. So we're keeping that attitude of, no, this is about me approaching this problem I'm having and being okay with what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is that the point where you're writing dramatic letters, or I don't mean dramatic, but is that where you're generally scripting something?
Most interventionists have people write letters to keep them on script with, I had a very specific script I wanted people to use when I did interventions. Still do occasionally around the edges now, but much less so since I'm kind of retired myself.
Mm-hmm.
Different interventionists have different comfort level of what they do and how they want people to do that so that they just don't go off emotionally rattling, because that usually goes badly.
Yeah. And what is your advice on that to another interventionist?
My letters start out this way. I have people write 2 separate letters, so we have 2 shots at it. Letter number 1 is, I'm here because I love you and I'm concerned about you and any other emotionally connecting information between you and them. Why am I willing to be here today, basically? And then here is why I'm concerned, specific things that have been happening as to led to why you are concerned. And that in each case, you aren't saying you did this, you did that. You said under the influence, you did this, or because of the drugs. We're going to blame the drugs or the addiction, the substance use disorder for this behaviors that have happened, not you as a person. And then, will you please enter treatment today? And each person would write their own letters and have that letter number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Letter number 2 starts out, I'm sorry I have to be reading this letter. If I'm reading this letter, it means you're not willing to get help at this time. I encourage always leave the door open for somebody to get your help in the future. They may be someone like a spouse who's ready to say, here are the divorce papers and I'm not going to be here anymore. But the majority of the group are going to be saying, love you, care about you, desperately want you in our lives. But as long as we're willing to have your addiction in our life, why shouldn't you be willing to have it in yours? So we're here to tell you we aren't going to allow that, because we need to protect ourselves and those we protect from how that impacts us. And we're here for you when you're ready to seek the help we're asking.
Do you have any sense for success rate on that? Get to that. Well, I say it's kind of a broad question, but if we were to just take all 3 of them, would you say it's 1 in 10, 2 in 10? What do you, if you have a number?
At the lowest level, sort of anecdotally, of simply asking somebody to, we're at about a 10, 20% agree to go and then ultimately do something out of that process. Moving up to those informal level 2 interventions with a larger group requesting, we can get as high as 50% agreed to go and do something. And then with a formal intervention, if we get to the point where we need to do that, we're up to close to 80% do something within the next couple months following the intervention if families follow through with doing what they said they were going to do different.
And what would be those things that they're going to do differently?
Could be call me when you're ready to go to treatment at the most extreme. Did that with my own son. Love you, care about you. I can't sit here and interact with you and pretend everything's okay. If we go out to lunch, I'm going to say, hey, how you doing? You're going to say, fine. My head's going to scream, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to want to say something to him, and I don't want to have to go through that. I'm going to act to say, I'm here for you 100%. When you're ready to get help, I cannot co-sign what you're doing right now. We didn't have a relationship for a year and a half.
Wow, that's painful.
Now I got 6 years.
You say now he's got 6 years.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there we go. That's success.
Yeah. So, if people follow through, sometimes it's simply as simple as, I can't give you money anymore. Everybody gets to decide. I've worked with people who said, I'm not going to divorce my spouse. I made a commitment and believe that marriage is forever. And I said, then look at other things you can do to protect yourself. You may have to look at if they're, spending all the money. How can you get some legal advice about how can I potentially protect myself financially, given how their addiction is playing out in our life? You begin to look at how are the specifics of how their addiction is impacting you. You're not going to get to watch the grandkids anymore.
You can't take them in a car.
You can't take them in a car. So you begin to, and the funny thing is, not funny is probably not the right word, but ironically, families have already started making those adjustments. They just haven't told the person they're doing them.
Yeah.
They've already been kind of
not invite them to a party.
They don't call at after 5, or they don't invite them to the party. They don't, those types of things. They begin to make those, and they've never told the person. So this is also an opportunity to say, hey, here's something that I have done already, and that I'm going to continue to do, and maybe even decide whether I can't sit here and look at you right now and pretend like everything's okay when I don't think it is.
You always see in the TV the letter with the, if you don't go to rehab right now, X. Does it get to that point much?
That's actually, in my experience of how I teach people interventions, it doesn't.
Does not work.
It does not get to that point, because if people do a good job at making that request at level 1, of then bringing in a good solid group of people from the person's life at level 2, if there still is that available, most people have already agreed to seek action prior to having to do that, and they still have that trump card left for later if they need it later.
Yeah,
so to get to the point where we're actually sitting down doing a formal intervention is less than me coaching people behind the scenes on here's how you can start approaching this differently that can lead to people taking action.
How do you find somebody who will help you with an intervention?
Well, the treatment program, I worked with both as an employee and as a consultant for years. I did an intervention class for them at Lakeside Mountain Recovery Centers here.
I know them.
I did an intervention class for them for over 30 years till COVID hit, and we kind of stopped, and then it became informal, and then I got to where I'm moving towards retirement and didn't want to be, someplace every Wednesday night. And they still do some of that. There are other interventionists and, who are in private practice that do that. There's an intervention association.
There's an intervention association.
Yeah.
And you just look up intervention association.
Yeah.
And they give you recommendations in a given area.
People in the areas and things. Yeah. So
because to get the person, to train the person, they have to somehow or another they have to say, oh, I'm going to go to the rehab, or I got a kid in the rehab, or a lot of people don't know anything about that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know anything about any of this process, and they're just trying their best to do what comes naturally, which is to try not to get in arguments all the time. But when they just can't not do it anymore, they try to talk about it with the person and feel very helpless and hopeless. So yeah. So there are intervention specialists who do that, and resources through various treatment programs can help point people to those as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of.
Mhm.
I guess that's one of the benefits of the show,
Mhm.
where at least they may see the most dramatic aspect, but they realize, oh, there are people that guide this.
Uh-huh.
What's the likelihood of it derailing when you're having it, or how do you manage that as the intervention person?
I go in when we're actually doing a formal guided intervention where I've been sitting in the room with people that I don't know what they're going to do. I feel competent in responding to whatever they do.
Mm-hmm. It's game on.
It's just I feel confident in what I do, and yeah, I can't say what's going to happen, and we're going to respond. And if there are places where something happens that I'm going to approach you with, here are your options on how we continue now, to let them be the deciders of what do we do next based on whatever that specific thing is.
Yeah.
So somebody runs off, we will already have prepared for some people to go after them. We will sometimes set it up to where it's make it less easy for somebody to leave if possible, but I'm not gonna say block them or grab them or anything, because you're going to jail if you do that. So
you're not gonna post cops up on the outside.
Yeah. So considering I did interventions for probably close to 40 years, there have been a number of fairly crazy things. I mean, we've had the person being intervened on called the police. I tell people already, if we're sitting in their house and they ask me to leave, I'm leaving, because I'm not going to get arrested for you. I'm not going to behave illegally to do this. I'm going to behave so I can feel good about myself doing it. But I've had police called. I had some guy pull out, there's needles everywhere in the house, and the family was able to be there because they'd been paying for the house, and we were there, and it just was, he pulls out his crack pipe and he's got a rig set up with some heroin in it over here, and it's like, yeah, we're just gonna approach and see what we do.
He just starts cranking on it
and
right there in front of you,
in front of everybody, which gives an intervention on all of them to go, okay, here's what steps do we take as far as, are we ready to not continue to support this process, and how can we do that in a loving, caring way with the best chance for our loved one to get help, as opposed to just cut off.
Yeah, we can't do it anymore.
So the notion that this is you're out of my life if you don't go to treatment thing, I would not participate in an intervention that's what somebody was saying.
So you would not you would say, if somebody's just going to say you're out, done, that you would consider that to be, you would,
other than a spouse saying, here are the divorce papers.
Yeah. So you're not having all 6 of the people sit around and say, that's dramatic.
Yeah, I'm saying here, and the wording in the letter is, here are the things I need to do to protect myself and those I can protect from your addiction if you're not willing to get help.
Okay.
Which is different than, if you don't go to treatment, you're out of my life, you're cut out of the, it's like, no.
That's a little...
That person is now in their anger at not having any control over what this person does. They're not ready to do a formal intervention yet.
Okay, because they just don't understand.
They are not emotionally in the place to do it yet, which is why I teach this process, as opposed to throwing people into that formal intervention quickly without support to get there.
What would be the time frame? Roughly, what would be the time from start to finish?
Lots of variation.
I knew that answer, but go ahead.
Because I've had people who I spoke to them, we laid out the roadmap. they started at the bottom level and had parts of the group approach them. The person said no. They moved to the next level. They said no. We went over, here's the script for your letters. They wrote them quickly and were right on target. They had an understanding. They had taken some actions to go to, attend some support groups for the family. And within a week, we're doing an intervention. Others, I hear back from them in a year. And so I'm planting seeds. I'm educating. Here's a roadmap. What's the next indicated step for you? I'm always saying this is to get to the point where you're ready to change your behavior with this person you love, which might mean a big shift and maybe even an end to the relationship as the way it is. I'm never going to tell you you need to do that. That's up to you. If how do you walk through this process? And now we're back to education and support to help you walk through this very difficult process. So it just depends on where the people are at and what they're willing to do to start moving themselves in that direction. And it's funny. Remember I said, after a formal intervention, usually within 2 months, we're up to a very high percentage have agreed to go to treatment. That is if families follow through and do those things. Families are probably more likely to not follow through and do those things that they said they're going to do at the intervention than addicts are to relapse again. Their drug is to keep helping this person because that's what helps them feel good, and it feels too uncomfortable
They're
to
nurturing.
do something different. They struggle with that this would be an unloving, uncaring thing to do to not continue to do this.
Which would fall into the world
which
of
is a struggle,
enabling.
which would fall under that sort of headline, yes.
Do you like the term enabling?
It's as with many things in the world, as old as I am, I don't really have trouble with the word and my definition of the word. I have trouble with how people have modified and altered that definition. It's like the word addict and alcoholic. I have no trouble with those. I'm an addict and alcoholic in recovery. I have no trouble with those words. I have no shame about those things. I believe that, it's like saying, should I have shame about having a grass pollen allergy?
Yeah.
My brain did not respond to alcohol and drugs like other people's brains. And that became very clear. There's a history of it in my family. And just like there was grass pollen allergies, and but there are people who think that's a terrible, that the word is the problem as opposed to the lack of understanding. The word is
just another word.
So it's just a word.
What is your advice specifically to a family who might be listening right now? What would be the steps that you would say, here is my advice?
Education, support, understand I can't fix this person. And it's just that is how you walk through it, to understand that I am powerless over doing something about this person. That's a challenging thing to do, whether it's addiction, whether it's some other behavior, somebody, or mental illness, or whatever it is, that I can't somehow go in and get you to do something when it's in your best interest. And if you don't do it, you might be in trouble. But to really grasp that I don't have the power to do that is tough.
In your opinion,
and that still doesn't mean that you don't take actions and can't approach it, and you may get to the point of, I can't keep co-signing this or not. And if you don't, then you work on accepting it, because other than that, all you can do is keep nagging. And nagging doesn't work very well.
No, it doesn't. Well, Ross Finke, thanks so much for coming on. And I hope our listeners out there learned something. I know I did.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Mark Howley Show. If you found this story as intriguing as we did, give us a like, share the episode, and subscribe at The Mark Howley Show. New episodes every other Friday. Adios.